Yes.
I love this.
Okay.
Heather.
All right, good morning, Green Guild. This is Heather Wiskus coming to you live from Get Me Some Green Apothecary in Matthews Mint Hill. Today's Coffee Talk, we're going to be talking about anxiety, and you will hear voices that are off screen. That is totally okay. This is a private space for people to be able to choose, but I still want you to be able to hear some good information. You might not be able to see what we're going to do first, so I'm actually going to pause the video while we watch a video here, and then we're going to have open discussions about it. If you have Netflix at home, the show is called Explained, and we are watching the anxiety episode for Explained. It's about 20 minutes long, and then we're going to have an open discussion after. I can try to leave it on. You might be able to hear it, but you probably won't be able to see the video very well. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start this because it explains a lot, and then we're going to have open discussion. If the people watching on Facebook have any comments whatsoever, please just put them in the comments and we will respond to you accordingly and get back to you.
You will experience what a panic attack is like. And this is where I could actually do it if you want me to. Yeah. I'm feeling cold. My focus is narrowing.
Everything feels a little bit blurry.
I'm feeling tingling in my body.
Almost pins and needles.
Just warm all over.
Sweating like I was in the sauna.
It's feeling like it's harder to catch my breath.
Like there's nothing to breathe. Mine was racing so fast.
I feel like I kind of want to get out of here. And these sensations that I'm going through right now, this is what someone with a panic attack feels like. Now imagine how scary it would be if all of these sensations came out of nowhere.
A panic attack is just one really intense and by no means universal form of anxiety.
Anxiety is the most common mental illness.
30% of humans or so are destined to be seriously impaired with anxiety.
There's a chance someone in the room where you're watching this right now has anxiety.
Why do so many of us feel this way? And what can we do about it?
Here's what you need. How to relax.
You can start right now by thinking of some of the things that make you tense. Once she's gotten these little pills inside her, she knows that help is on the way.
Everybody's afraid of something or other.
This ailment is common to you, and to you.
Beginning to feel better? This is only the beginning.
What I found interesting is look at how old some of those commercials are. That's how long they've been dealing with this.
A warthog is not often sort of wallowing in the sort of anxiety that we think of in an everyday sense. If you're a warthog, pretty much what anxiety is about is seeing a lion at the end of the field, you better be vigilant.
The warthog's amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, identifies the lion as a threat, and that triggers the release of adrenaline throughout the body.
This is a brush fire for vigilance.
It prepares the body to face the threat and fight, or to flee. The warthog's heart is racing, and breathing speeds up. Lung passages expand and certain blood vessels dilate, all to make sure plenty of oxygen gets to the muscles needed to flee. Those muscles tense, ready for action. The warthog's pupils dilate so its eyes can take in more of the scene. And then its peripheral vision shrinks to focus on the lion in front of it. Other systems get shut down.
You got better things to do with your energy than digest breakfast or worry about reproduction or something like that.
The warthog stops salivating and digesting. Blood flow is diverted away from the stomach, away from the skin, and nerves involved in arousal get turned off.
Everything that's going on in his body at the time is wonderfully adaptive.
Anxiety evolved as a helpful emotion. It has prepared the warthog to escape with its life. This time. If you're a warthog, there's a pretty good chance you'll eventually be killed by a lion. But if you're a human, you're probably worried about other things.
We're smart enough to mobilize the exact same physiology as does that warthog seeing the lion at the other end of the field, and we do it worrying about the 30-year mortgage we just signed on for. Oh no, only 3 months until April 15th and paying taxes, or oh no, how many more decades of this or that, or oh no, this traffic jam is horrible. And the key thing in all those cases is we're filled with fear, we're filled with distress, we're filled with anxiety, and what your body is doing is every perfect adaptation to send energy to your thigh muscles to run for your life.
You can't fight or flee your taxes or traffic, but our body wants to respond just like a warthog when it sees a lion. Think of the symptoms of stress: racing heart, tense muscles, stomach aches, a feeling of pins and needles, dry mouth, not wanting to or being able to have sex, all very familiar. The amygdalas of humans with severe anxiety are overly sensitive. They identify threats in everyday situations and set off this adrenaline chain reaction. People with clinical anxiety see the world differently. In one study, researchers showed people these faces. Some were happy, some were angry, some were in between. People with social anxiety disorder were more likely to say ambiguous faces were angry. And people with clinical anxiety often can't reason their way out of the feeling, because the logical part of the brain is unable to rein in the amygdala. And so sometimes, anxiety can build and build into a full-blown crisis.
I had the experience a few times of having a panic attack at work while on stage. My heart goes out to anybody who has to experience that on a daily basis.
Maria Bamford has performed on many stages.
I had to take a break from work because I went mental.
It happened before a show, and I thought, oh no, but I didn't want to stop doing stand-up.
When anxiety starts to get in the way of your life, that's when it becomes an anxiety disorder.
The different types of anxiety disorders can be grouped by the kinds of fears that are involved.
Catastrophic fears. These are beliefs that something really bad is going to happen.
This includes separation anxiety, excessive fear of being away from loved ones. And then there are specific fears or phobias: arachnophobia, glossophobia, ophidiophobia.
Fear of evaluation.
That's the hallmark of social anxiety, the most common anxiety disorder, a persistent, debilitating fear of being watched and judged. And there's selective mutism, inability to speak in certain situations.
Fear of losing control.
It's a big part of panic disorder. You fear the loss of control that comes with panic attacks. Agoraphobia takes this to an extreme. You avoid public places that might trigger an attack.
And a fear of uncertainty, of not knowing what's going to happen.
This area includes generalized anxiety disorder and obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, a fixation on impulses and thoughts.
We all have bizarre thoughts. You think of a thought like, oh, that dog is sexy. And then you go, oh, it's very nice. And then you move on. But somebody with a tendency to OCD goes, oh, it's weird that I just had that. That's when the loop begins, and then you start walking over the side of the street when you see a Pomeranian. So mine was, I started to fear that I was going to physically harm my parents and my sister, that I would serial kill them, I guess. I avoid knife drawers. I don't want to make eye contact. Oh, if I make eye contact, I gotta squinch my hands 3 times. Just becomes this more elaborate ritual thing. Then finally I Googled creepy thoughts that are unwanted, and up came OCD. Turns out it's a whole thing.
OCD is famous for its rituals, repeatedly counting objects, checking locks, or clenching your hands a specific number of times. It's all driven by the fear that something bad will happen if you don't do the ritual right.
That's right.
Where do all these anxiety disorders come from? Well, some of it is inherited. If you have a parent with anxiety, you're more likely to be anxious yourself. And women are up to 2 times more likely to have an anxiety disorder than men. Anxiety also seems to have something to do with the balance of chemicals in your brain.
Probably the most famous one these days is serotonin.
There's a theory that people with anxiety have too little serotonin, the same imbalance that some claim is responsible for depression. People with depression often do have anxiety, but the link isn't well understood.
And it turns out, no surprise, there's not just one neurotransmitter or brain messenger that seems to be out of whack.
But that off-kilter chemical soup is just the start of the story. The seeds of anxiety can also be planted by traumatic experiences.
Your brain is an association machine. it connects things together.
That can be a very good thing.
If you get attacked by a lion that leapt out of a bush, well, now you're going to associate that bush with fear, and so you're going to start avoiding those situations.
And that might keep you alive.
If you, as a human, are spending your early years seeing a loved one physically abused by somebody else, being tossed out on the street, being brought up as a refugee with shelling all around you, you're just another primate whose brain is being taught to have a lifetime of vigilance.
Take the classic and pretty problematic case of little Albert.
In the little Albert experiment, researchers took a small child and exposed that child to a white rat. This soft, cute, cuddly rat.
The researchers would hit a steel bar with a hammer to make a loud, scary sound every time the rat came near.
So in this experiment, the researchers were able to create a phobia, a fear of small white animals. And little Albert's fear grew from just the mouse to other objects as well.
A rabbit, a fur muff, even a Santa Claus mask. Some people with anxiety do this too. They overgeneralize. Harmless things take on irrational, scary associations.
When I was 5 years old, I watched Jaws for the first time. I can still remember that sound of Jaws, the donna, donna, in my mind, these things got paired up together. So I avoided going into the water. Never learned how to swim. I would even, as a kid, stand up on the ledges of my bathtub because I was afraid a shark might come out of the drain.
It looks as if anxiety problems like this are becoming more common, at least according to some measures. In the past couple of years, anxiety products have become bestsellers. The prescription of benzodiazepines, a kind of anti-anxiety medication, has been rising, and Google searches for anxiety are way up.
I think what's happening here is some of the stigma around anxiety is declining.
Most young Americans now see seeking mental health counseling as a sign of strength, unlike older generations.
It's definitely something that in media is being discussed a lot. A lot has been written about the epidemic of anxiety.
And one particular culprit keeps coming up.
Social media might be causing more anxiety. Social media is a fun distraction, but it can actually cause social anxiety.
Social media.
Social media is causing anxiety and depression increase.
You're scrolling through your Instagram feed and you see everyone else's wonderful, amazing life. If you're someone who's vulnerable to experiencing anxiety, you might experience it more in that situation.
And a lot of social media is designed to hold your attention, and anxiety is a powerful way to do that. Teenagers who spend more hours looking at screens are more likely to have been diagnosed with anxiety. And people who spend more time on social media feel more isolated, which can make the symptoms of anxiety worse. But the takeaway is unclear. Are anxious, lonely people just more drawn to screens? Or is social media really driving an increase in anxiety?
I feel like we have created the automobile. The automobile has gained complete penetration in society, and everyone's driving around, and we haven't invented the safety belt yet.
But it's hard to tell if clinical anxiety is actually on the rise because the way we define and study anxiety keeps changing.
If we look at research into how common anxiety disorders are, the rates haven't changed.
In 2015, researchers collected a few huge, rigorous surveys from the last few decades, and they found no evidence that the prevalence rates of anxiety disorders had changed. After all, this isn't the first time people have felt like they were living through an anxiety epidemic. Back in Victorian England, people were very anxious about swelling cities, the gulf between rich and poor, and new technology. This cartoon, from a 1906 Punch magazine, paints the wireless telegraph as a threat to natural human interactions. Stressed out Victorians sometimes turned to laudanum, a mixture of alcohol and opium, to quiet their racing minds. Across the Atlantic, Americans claimed their own special variety of anxiety, Americanitis. Women were often prescribed a rest cure, sometimes confined to bed for 8 weeks. But some men, including future President Teddy Roosevelt, got the West cure. They were sent to the Western Territories to live in cabins, ranch, and hunt in rugged outfits. The period after World War II was another era of growth and change. A refugee of that war, chemist Frank Berger, discovered a chemical that calmed down lab rats but didn't knock them out. By 1955, that tranquilizer was being sold as Milton and quickly became the best-selling drug ever marketed in the United States. It was such a sensation, one of America's biggest TV stars at the time, Milton Berle, even jokingly prescribed it on his talk show to Elvis Presley.
I'd rather have a quiet time for a girl. Someone wants to date, someone that'll calm me down and relax me, you know?
You don't want a girl, you want a Milltown.
Big changes have always meant new triggers. And that's something pretty unique to humans. Unlike warthogs, we keep inventing new reasons to be anxious, reasons we can't fight or flee. And every generation has struggled, with mixed success, to figure out what to do about it. Worldwide, only about 1/10 of people with diagnosable anxiety receive adequate treatment.
Most people who experience anxiety tend to try to just get through it themselves.
Some people drink to relax, but alcohol can make anxiety worse in the short and long term. Others turn to weed, and here there's mixed results. One compound in marijuana, THC, can increase your heart rate, so that may make some feel more anxious. But there's early evidence that another compound, CBD, actually helps, at least in the short term. Then there's exercise. If your body is keyed up for action with this misfiring fight or flight response, if it's looking for a way to close that loop,
sometimes it could feel great to go work out, to get out some of that tension.
I exercise, I try to eat well, but no more than your average bear, and I don't think that is as helpful to me as meds.
there are lots of different types of anti-anxiety drugs. There are benzodiazepines that make you more responsive to a sort of natural sedative found in your brain. And there are antidepressants that help you even out your serotonin levels.
They can do wonders to this sticky, obsessive rumination about sadness, and the same exact drugs working on the same neurochemical system can do wonders about that sticky, obsessive sense of fear and disquiet that anxiety is about.
And lots of other options. Navigating them all, and their side effects, can be really hard.
My medication process took, I would say about 15 years to find. It's really exhausting and terrifying.
I'm in this business and proud of the progress we've made, but all things considered, we are pitifully incapable of dealing with these disorders.
You didn't want to go on what I considered to be heavier drugs because the side effects were a tremor and weight gain. Ego, weight gain, tremor, also ego. Didn't want a tremor on stage. But now, of course, weakness is the brand. Don't want to quash this cash cow. And if someone were to say, oh, that affects your comedy and you're not as funny, then I would say, well, then I would rather not be that funny.
One 2015 review of 234 studies compared the effects of doing nothing, exercise, placebo pills, therapy, mindfulness meditation, and medication. They found the most effective treatment was a combination of drugs and therapy. One of the most popular types of therapy is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, where you talk with a therapist to alter negative thought and behavior patterns. For patients with anxiety, a specific CBT technique is often used, called exposure therapy.
We create scenarios that activate these fears until you get to a point where you learn that you can actually manage these thoughts until those associations, they start to break down.
They had me record all my worst fears happening in real time in a script that I had written myself, and I had to listen to it over and over and over and over again. You've made your parents into a Caesar salad and you chop them up into chunks of bits. Just let your anxiety flood to the topmost moment and then find out that you don't die, that you can't get any more anxious and you're still fine. And within like 2 weeks, something that had been a bane of my existence, age until I was 35, was gone. I don't feel like, oh God, I'm better, stronger, faster. all I could do is just keep asking for help. So I have a text group of different female comedians who I can text if I, have some concern, saying, oh God, I feel so scared, I'm so scared, I don't think I can do it. And then they go, okay, well that's okay if you can't do it. Okay, well maybe I'll try.
As a field, we used to think that we might be able to cure anxiety, and that doesn't necessarily seem to be the case. Treating anxiety is much more about learning how to experience anxiety.
We survive with the right amount of anxiety. The plan is not to get rid of it. The plan is to just have the biologically rational, real bases of it turning our systems on.
A few years ago, I was going to a psychology conference in Hawaii, and my wife really wanted to go snorkeling and spend time in the ocean. So I took swimming lessons. I learned how to swim. I learned how to stay afloat.
And when he got to Hawaii, he headed out on a boat to go snorkeling.
I was so confident in that moment because I had done all this exposure work on myself. And then our guide said, enjoy yourself, stay away from the giant sea turtles, and don't mind the sand sharks. I had a 15-minute long panic attack out there in the open ocean.
Oh, man.
And what I learned from that experience is I could get through it, and those sand sharks had absolutely no interest in me whatsoever.
So I'm glad we took a minute to watch that, because I think it adds it's a nice platform for us to kind of begin our conversation today. So for those of you that have never been to a coffee talk before with us, my name is Heather. I'm one of the owners and founders of Get Me Some Green. Our original mission was to demystify the medical community and bring awareness to some of these natural remedies that are available to us, and some of the things that we do have control of, but maybe we forgot we have control of them. So one of the things we like to do is have mastermind sessions like this. Don't worry, none of you are on Facebook. It's just these 3 chairs. Usually my husband and Daryl sit next to me, but they're making coffee for everyone today. So we like to watch a video or pull something like this so we can open up lines of conversation. One of the things that struck me when I watched this and I found really disturbing were, one, we've been dealing with anxiety far longer than we like to admit. We like to blame cell phones, but we saw that it's been happening a lot, Victorian times. Like, the human body looks for things to become stressed and worried about. And that I found to be incredibly profound. And then, can we just talk about who used their baby as an experiment for this? Like, can we just have a conversation with that mother? Can we go back in time and say, maybe this isn't the best thing for your child? Just a thought, because I can only imagine where that child is as an adult. But even still, it bears that question, why do human beings look for anxiety? Is it because, like, in primal times when we were all cave women and cavemen, we legitimately had a fear of being eaten by lions and getting hit by lightning? So we didn't have to create it because those fears were really real. But in modern times, as we've developed cars and places to live, and now we wear clothing and not loincloths, are we creating things unnaturally and like subconsciously that are generating stressor responses to us and creating anxiety for us? I never saw someone that has obsessive compulsive disorder as someone that suffers anxiety until I started going through a lot of these courses, learning about it, because I have so many clients that come in and want to talk about their anxiety levels. What you perceive as normal stress truly is just a different variation of anxiety, and how as a society we're just not dealing with it. And I have 2 small children. I don't know if any of you have small children today, but my child freaks out in school because the testing is, they put so much emphasis on, if you're gonna fail, if you don't get a 3 on your EOG, you're a failure. That is a lot of stress for a 9-year-old child who should really be worrying about if he's got clean underwear in the morning, and that should be his biggest concern in life. So I'm interested to hear some feedback from you guys on what you've experienced and how you deal with your anxiety. And me, I obviously opened up a place like this to provide a platform, not only for myself, but for other people that need to find something other than meds. I don't know if meds are the answer. There's a lot of negative side effects. My mom has, she gave me permission to say this, so I'm not throwing my mom under the bus, but my mom has bipolar disorder and she's a severe manic depressive. So I watched her struggle with this most of my life. She got diagnosed in her late 20s, early 30s, so she didn't even realize the anxiety she was feeling was a chemical imbalance in her brain. But oftentimes the doctors are still trying to figure out, because yes, there is a chemical imbalance that happens where you're getting more serotonin, but that's related to the flight syndrome, right? Your brain starts firing those things. So when you live in a constant fight or flight syndrome, your digestion goes down, your sex drive goes down, because your body, like he said, shuts off those other things and it keeps just the core available, which is why you'll see a lot of people that are suffering from anxiety tend to bear more weight. They tend to have diabetes issues, they tend to have sleep disorders, because their body is taking away from those things that help them in those areas. So my mom and I have had conversations like this a lot, because it's a way for me to connect to her and then her to heal with me. And one of her doctors said to her at one point, Deb, I can't tell you if you're chemically imbalanced or if you're creating a chemical imbalance, because you're constantly living in this state. And I thought it was really interesting, because back in the late 70s, when she was having a really hard time struggling with this, she was really fighting medication at the time. They put her through transcendental meditation courses, and it changed her life. And she was actually med-free for several years, but then outside stressors took over, and now she leans really heavily on meds. So it's just very interesting to me to see that she was able to go years without any meds and be perfectly leveled just by retraining her brain. And then I think that goes really closely to some of the things they talked about, how they're putting people in those situations to let them know, like, hey, if you jump out of this plane and you got a parachute, that's it. It's gonna be scary, but you're gonna land and you're gonna look up and everything's gonna be like it never really happened. So I can't help but wonder, what is the society we can do to help more people acknowledge that what you're feeling is okay, and instead of trying to change the way you feel, embrace it and work through that. And I don't know how to bring awareness to that. So what have some of you done to deal with stress and anxiety in your lives?
Well, I'll share this. I was talking to another mom, and I've got teenagers in my house, and she has teenagers too, and we were both lamenting the fact that I wish there was some sort of test, like a litmus test, that you could give yourself or your child and be like, oh, okay, yes, you definitely are suffering from depression, or no, you're not, or you definitely, kind of like, God, wouldn't that be great? Because I've read a lot about anxiety and depression, and it's kind of one of those gray areas, right? Where this guy says this girl says this, the experts say, well, if you've experienced this more than 3 days in a row, then this. So I struggle with the gray area around defining it, and I noticed that this show talked about, so anxiety is anxiety is anxiety, and all humans have these types of responses, but when it interferes with life function is when it becomes a disorder. So that seems pretty clear, but then it still leaves that murky area. Well, how much interference with life? Is my daughter not going to that fall dance? Maybe she wouldn't have gone anyway. Is this a problem? Is this not a problem? So I'd love to hear other people's thoughts about when they definitely define that, yeah, this is a problem, and then, yeah, solutions. I'm looking for that too. I think there's really something to the whole meditation thing. But again, as a clarity seeker, I wish there was some kind of like litmus test that could say, oh yes, Adrienne, you're doing it right. That is definitely, yes, you hit meditation.
Something measurable.
Yes. Not like I practice and practice and practice. I don't know if I'm doing this right or not,
Kind of like blood pressure. We know our blood pressure's high. We can measure that.
Yes.
We know our blood pressure's low. We can measure that. We know we're sleeping. We can measure that. But how do you measure the level of anxiety or stress that's normal for you? Because what's normal for your daughter may be completely not normal for my daughter. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. There's got to be something to help us as a society. Though I am grateful that as a society we're more comfortable with saying, you know what, I'm just stressed out today. Like, bringing awareness and making that okay to say, I think has shed a light on something that we all suffer from. I love when people say, I've never been stressed out. Stop lying. It's like saying you've never peed. Yes, you have. We all have, and that's okay. But how do we get past that as a society?
Well, isn't it more about how you feel? I mean, why is it important to have a label? You know, because you could be at a different level any given day of the week. So really, I think the litmus test is, how do you feel? Do you feel vibrant in your life that day? If not, then you have some work to do, right? I don't know if that helps.
Where can they teach that though? Like, were you taught that in school or through your mom or through your family?
No, but I would say that I've been doing a lot of meditating and mindfulness work, and this seems to be where I'm finding it now, just more recently in my life.
I think for me it started when I started doing yoga.
And yoga, yes.
I started finding that quieter place where my mind wasn't thinking about 800 things. It was literally just thinking about what I was doing at that exact moment in time. But it's not easy. Like telling my 14-year-old to do yoga, she's like, whatever. It's not something she views, but I think we've forgotten. I remember in school, I'm 46, so I remember in 3rd grade, we would have 2 minutes of quiet reflection every single day, where the teacher would have us put our head on our desk. It was usually right before or right after lunch. It was like midday, where she wanted us to quietly reflect on things that we felt throughout the morning. What did that feel like? How did that make you feel? And take like ownership of that. And I always thought she was just weird as can be, but I really enjoyed it. And then the days we had a sub and the sub didn't do it, I noticed that I was more just agitated at the end of the day and anxious, and like just I didn't feel like as accomplished as I was on the days that my regular teacher was in the classroom. And I didn't realize until I became an adult what she was doing. And it was just, it made such a profound impact on my life. And I can't help but wonder if there's something that we can do to bring more awareness to that and make that okay for other people to acknowledge. It scares the hell out of me how many clients come in and talk to me about the medications that they're on for anxiety, because they're putting a falsified chemical balance in their brain. Their body is still in fight or flight syndrome. All it's doing is balancing one part. So as he was talking about the show, which is why I love this as an example, he's talking about how all of these functions in your body respond to that feeling of anxiety or stress. But if all you're doing is balancing one, what about the rest? Your stomach is still not working, your hormones are still off, your muscles are still tense, all of those things are still happening. The only thing that's balanced is the serotonin levels in your brain and the dopamine, the 3 chemicals that comprise how your body handles the stress from a firing standpoint. So what are we doing to address that? And I actually sat in a room with clinicians and I asked that question, and I got about as much silence as I'm getting here. It was shocking because, and then one of the doctors said to me, he goes, I've never heard anyone word it like that and ask that question. You know,
it's almost like
you gotta look at the whole pizza.
Yeah, like the house is on fire, but I'm just gonna put on a blindfold. But it's still gonna burn down, but this is the, so I don't see it feel, like the drugs that aren't addressing the other issues in your body, it's just putting on a blindfold so that you feel less stress, but your sleep isn't well, your hormones aren't well, your digestion isn't well. It's almost like just masking all of that. But the house is still burning.
The house is still burning. And we all have something. That's why I laughed at my husband, because he'll tell, and Daryl will attest to this, you have to lock the door and pull 3 times. 3 times, not 2 times, not 1 time, 3 times. And he will go back if he sees me not pull, and he will turn around and pull the door 3 times. And I don't know what triggered that in your life.
So I was working at a smoothie shop in college, and one of the girls that I worked with didn't shut the back door one night or lock it, and the place ended up getting robbed. So, and then, so everybody looked at me as the fault when I wasn't really the one that did it. So every time I tell all new employees, I said, look, when you lock the door, just pull it a couple times and make sure it's actually closed or actually locked. So yes, that's where it originated from.
But that's an exact thing. Here's one life thing that has now changed the way, because I even noticed that you do that at our house. You'll turn the knob 3 times. You'll like wiggle it every single time.
It's not
I never
OCD,
really
because
noticed it.
I'm definitely not OCD by any standards. It's more of a protection aspect. So I'm protecting this so I don't have that anxiety when I go home later that night. Oh crap, did I turn off the stove or did I lock the door at the store? You know, I don't want to get robbed again.
I think that one thing is OCD, but I think what you just said is a really valuable point, because we take something in our lives and we normalize it, and then it's not an issue. But it is, for you, that is an OCD pattern. Now, it's a minimal one. It's the only one. I tap my toothbrush 3 times. Every single time. It's unconscious. And don't ask me why. There's nothing in my childhood with 3 taps of the toothbrush. But every time I brush my teeth, it's 1, 2, 3. Every single time. I can't explain. My daughter thinks that she was trying to do it twice, and it feels weird. Like, I tried to do it twice once. I spent the entire day going, this isn't right. I needed to just tap something one more time, and I can't explain it. I don't know where that came from for me, but that's my little OCD thing. Like, I gotta tap.
But it's also training and repetition, right? So everybody that works in the store now, I guarantee you, when they walk out of here and lock up for the night, they're pulling the door a couple times to make sure it's closed, right? So it's more of a psychological branding, like with the kid Albert. You know, it's kind of the same scenario there, like, you know, Bart Simpson going up to grab the cupcake and it's plugged into an electrical outlet. Well, he keeps getting buzzed, but he still wants the cupcake, so he keeps going back and grabbing it, right? It's kind of that OCD or that mentality that you gotta have this, or it has to be done this way, right?
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So I guess my goal today is meeting with other people that are dealing with this, because I want to hear, what are people doing to manage their anxiety? What are you doing to manage your stress? What did you find in your life that's working for you, and what are you still struggling with that maybe isn't? Because I think the more times we have open conversations as human beings, we can develop more compassion and share ideas. Mindfulness is definitely one of them. I mean, my mom experienced it, you've experienced help with mindfulness. I myself have experienced a lot of insight through yoga and mindfulness. But it's a training. I don't think we're born to be mindful. I think we're born to be selfish assholes, quite frankly. I mean, if you really think about it, you know, when you're born, no one says, okay, be mindful if you're crying because mommy's trying to nap. Because I just nursed you and I need sleep. Like, it doesn't happen that way. So how can we take a very archaic society and caveman-like mentality and turn that into mindfulness, so that our children, our children's children, and the next generation, even us today, can walk out the door and be a little bit more conscious of, that's really causing a reaction with me. I'm gonna pause. How do we teach more people to take that pause and acknowledge, maybe this isn't working right now. I think we forget. I think cell phones help us to perpetuate that, but they're not going away. So I know I had one person say, well, stop using your cell phone. That's like stopping eating. It's not gonna happen. So what can we do to create that pause, or what have you done? Does anyone else want to share?
I'll share something that I tried years ago, and it really helped me, and I'm going back to it. It really helps. Has anybody heard of like tapping? Like you tap on meridian. Yeah, I love that. I almost
like access point therapy.
Like acupressure. Yeah, you tap on, like you know, there's like 8 points on your body, but it's. I almost always feel calm like right after it.
Where's that book at? I was
Do
looking
you
for
have
it
it?
the other day.
Actually,
Yeah.
Body Talk.
Body Talk, that's what it was.
Access point therapy, that's exactly what this is.
Okay.
And it talks about tapping, because when you tap, it resets your meridians, and when you reset, and it's funny because how many of us thought like meditation was that hokey pokey hippie thing? Oh, those stupid hippies. They've been doing it since Victorian times. This isn't hokey pokey. This is, I mean, I thought it was so funny when they were talking about one of our ex-presidents. He went on the Western cure. Can we have that conversation? Like, seriously? But isn't that exactly what some of the retreats you hear about today are? Yeah. We're going on a yoga retreat. We're going on a global hike. We're going as a group mindfulness session. It's the same thing with a different word. We're just not calling it Western. We're calling it Crowder's Mountain Hike. But it's the same thing. But I got a lot of value out of this. Yeah, Body Access talks about different types of tapping, but they don't talk about tapping like your meridians. They talk about tapping your heart source and your mind source, because your brain controls all of the chemicals in your head, but your heart controls how it gets pushed through your lymphatic system. So they really talk about tapping here in your heart source and then tapping on your brain. And then she had us like tap here, then an inch back, and then start from the brow and tap all the way back to the back of their spine. So 3 here, 3 here, 3 here.
Do you say anything when you do it?
You can, if you believe in affirmations. I'm a true believer that what you think you can desperately manifest. And I always thought that was kind of like a hokey thing for when I was in my 20s. I'm just like, whatever. But then I witnessed my mom constantly say, "I'll never have enough." And you know what? Sorry, Mom, you gave me permission. She doesn't have enough to this day, but she's been telling herself that same recording her whole life. So it doesn't surprise me that she doesn't have enough. And I used to get really mad at her for it, because she trained me to be the exact opposite. And I use the word train because she used direct intention to make sure I would always wake up thinking, I'm beautiful, I'm smart, I'm successful, but I don't know why she didn't do it for herself. Like, she gave me all these amazing tools, but she didn't give them to herself. And I'm not sure why, and that's a conversation that we're still trying to navigate together on why, but I think it's profound that she can recognize that I needed it. Why can't we see it for ourselves?
I have a great example of the body talk stuff. So I'm allergic to bees, right? So if I'd be sitting in a park or something, all of a sudden a bee would come by me, I'd be like this, oh my God, and like literally like run away, you know? So the anxiety there with the bees was really, you know, hard for me, because I was mowing one day at our old house in Chicago. One got underneath my shirt, I got stung twice. I could immediately feel the swelling go up into the neck and like, you know, and then I started having panic attacks because I would have to go to the hospital, right? So I started doing the body talk, and with certain minerals and other hokey pokey, if you call it, but different minerals and different metals that she would put on me as she was doing the treatment. So now today, based on some of that, which has stuck with me through the years, now this is a few years ago, now if there's a bee that comes by me, I'm just like, whatever, just get away. And I swear I've gotten stung before, and the reaction is not as bad as what it once was when I was really highly allergic. So I promise you, something like that does work, or like meditation, or just coming into your own and concentrating how your body's going to react to something like that. Now, when I get, bit by a mosquito, down here they're pretty brutal, I still swell up pretty bad, and I itch and itch and itch. And that anxiety is kind of transformed from a bee to a mosquito. So when I see a mosquito now, I'm like, all over the place. But I know it does work just from a psychological aspect to retrain your brain and retrain yourself. So I'm not going to be all freaked out when a bee comes by me. So now it's like, look, there's a bee. That's great. I hope he, nourishes some flowers and create other things. But so I can definitely attest to meditation and tapping and different modes of modalities of how to retrain that brain from an anxiety standpoint.
We need a person like this here. You can come sit with me. It looks weird, like I'm all by myself.
No.
Come on, Daryl. Come on, Eric. Go in these chairs.
Hit on before. I think this whole meditation, natural way to reduce anxiety, it's ebbed and flowed over the years, over the decades, and I think it's in a huge boost right now, research, and I'm grateful that I'm at this stage and I'm tapping into it. I wish I had tapped into it a lot earlier, And your granddaughter's doing yoga, and I think there's some schools that are teaching more mindfulness to kids and getting in touch with their feelings and not pushing their feelings away or reacting, not paying attention to their feelings. So I think there's a lot of good things happening. I'm kind of curious about the CBD impact with anxiety. Like that's what I'm very curious about.
And you know, and it's CBD is an interesting tool for anxiety because it falls under the category of medicine. So when they talked about, well, she feels better with meds, CBD is perceived as a medicine because it is not in your body. We're putting something, anytime you're putting something in your body, it's considered medicine for the purpose of studies like this. How CBD has been working with anxiety is it helps balance all three of the hormones in your brain naturally, but it doesn't have any of the other side effects. The difference between something like a Zoloft or a Xanax or an olazapam and CBD is all of those things focus on the one chemical. They're designed to target that one pituitary gland and release the one chemical in your brain, whereas CBD works with your entire endocannabinoid system that runs parallel to your nervous system. It shadows right behind it, which is why we overlooked it for so many years. It just kind of looked like a shadow, but it sits right behind your endocrine system. So when you take CBD, it's taking away the entire fight or flight response out of your body. It's calming the entire thing. So it's calming your digestive system, it's calming your hormones, it's calming your muscles. Everything is responding and putting you back to the place where you're neutral, where you can be like, do I really need to fight or flight right now? Or can I just simply let go of this moment? So it works differently than a lot of the chemicals that you see as far as medications, but it doesn't have any side effects. So, but they talked about THC. THC is not the same as CBD. So in hemp, there's over 140 different cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are the same chemical found in any leafy green substance. So if you have salads, you're getting cannabinoids. But if you have chocolate, you're getting caffeine. But you're not getting as much caffeine as you would in a cup of coffee from an actual coffee plant. Similar to this. If you eat leafy greens, you're getting cannabinoids, but you're not getting as many cannabinoids as you would if you ate or consumed a derivative of a hemp plant. So that's really what the difference is. So when you take this, it kind of puts your body back in a homeostasis where you can acknowledge, you can choose, like a warthog, is that a lion or is that the wind blowing in the grass? It's just the wind blowing in the grass, and it allows your body to start functioning the way it should naturally without just addressing the one piece. So that's how CBD works. Though with that said, back to the THC, even though we don't have that here, just so you know, like we don't have high dosages of THC here. But with people that have, when they experience heart racing anxiety, or their heart's like palpitating, CBD may not be the best choice for you because if it's got a fractionated amount of THC, or the 0.3%, which is federally legal, it could exacerbate the feeling of a heart attack because it can speed up your heart rate. So that's why I ask people, what are you experiencing? What are the type of symptoms? Because if you're experiencing heart racing, I'm going to guide you towards a broad spectrum. Anything that's a broad spectrum does not have THC in it. It just has the CBD compounds and the derivative sisters and brothers, CBGN, CBGA.
So what would make you lean them towards the THC? Like what is the benefit that the THC has for them?
THC, a fractionated amount of THC helps open up all the receptors. So you have something in your body called the CB1 receptor and a CB2 receptor. Both receptors receive cannabinoids and know how to process cannabinoids naturally, but the CB1 focuses more on THC. When you have a fractionated amount or micro dosage amount, it helps all the receptors open up to work more symbiotically together. If you don't have THC, it's not going to fire everything at the same time. That's about the biggest cause. But if you're having a heart palpitation, we definitely don't want to exacerbate that. I experienced that. I thought I was having heart attacks. I swear to you, my heart was racing. I swear to God it was. I went to my doctor. I wore a heart monitor for 2 weeks. She goes, yeah, so your heart's fine? And I'm like, it's racing. And she goes, it's actually not. I had a 2-week long anxiety attack. I don't know what started it. I couldn't answer the question, but I literally thought I was dying. I felt at every moment in time my heart was going to jump clear out of my chest. So I stopped doing everything in my life. I'm like, okay, I'm not eating chocolate, I'm not having caffeine, I'm not doing anything. And it took me a while to just kind of, nothing was working. And I went to my body talk therapist. I'm like, okay, my heart's literally jumping out of my chest. And she goes, let's do some work. I had to see her like every day for a week and a half because I was just, I couldn't get it under control. I remember that very specifically. And at that time in Chicago, there was medical marijuana. So I was using that. Didn't put 2 and 2 together with the high levels of THC, because at that time it was a 0.9%, way too high for what I was experiencing. It was actually making it worse. And that's when I started to really go down the path of, okay, separating out the cannabinoids, because some cannabinoids promote other things. THC is the only one that can cause your heart to race though. So that's the, yeah.
Can you go back to the endocannabinoid system? You said it's a shadow system.
It is a shadow system.
Is it an actual physical system, or is it more of an energy like they talk about?
No, it is a physical system that they can trace, that shadows right behind. That poster right there actually shows some of the endocannabinoid receptors. Sadly, that poster is already too old because they didn't start discovering that we had an endocannabinoid system until 1997.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so how did it go unnoticed? Are the glands? I mean, I don't understand what it is. If you open the body, what would you see?
It shadows right behind your nervous system. So it's kind of like you've got your fascia tissue that goes in between your muscles. It's like a fascia that wraps around your nervous system. We never really, that's all we thought it was. So
it's like
scientists, yeah, that's for layman's terms, that's what they thought it was. They were like, oh, that's just the coating on our nerves. We didn't think that it actually was a system in and of itself, of its own.
So it's like a coating.
And now it has its own, now they're discovering, oh, we have an entire endocannabinoid system looking for cannabinoids that we eat and how to process them.
And hormones too, or?
It helps balance your hormones. So CBD doesn't cure anything. Let me just preface that. So when someone says CBD cured this, I'm just here to tell you right now, CBD doesn't cure anything at all. Vitamin B doesn't cure anything. Vitamin C doesn't cure anything. Vitamin D doesn't cure anything. These things don't cure things in your body. But when you put your body back at homeostasis, your body is able to cure itself again. When you're born, you're in perfect balance. Over time, we start to get out of balance, and that's what causes a lot of the stressors and anxieties and physical stressors that we have. But when you take CBD, it aligns your body back up so it can say, oh, wait a minute.
But couldn't the medical manufacturers of all these medications for anxiety say the same thing? Couldn't they say the same thing, like this is helping to balance your serotonin levels?
Oh, and they do.
So, like, that's where I'm trying to figure out, how is this any different from another medication,
Right.
substance that you're...
The biggest difference from what I can explain without going into the genetic breakdown, CBD is natural. It's not man-processed. We're not adding chemicals, extracting chemicals. It's not manipulated by man. It's literally a natural plant. It's as natural as picking lettuce out of your garden.
But I can't make it myself.
Yes, you can.
Can I extract it from the plant without...
Yes, you can. I've written several articles teaching people how to do it too, because I think medicine should be attainable for everybody. But just like chamomile can relax you, CBD functions the same way. So can doctors say it? Yeah, but this is a plant that anyone can grow. So when you get onto the political landscape, and I try to avoid that landscape, but just to preface it, anybody can grow it. It's literally a weed, literally. So I could take a handful of seeds and throw them out in the parking lot. It will find a crack in that parking lot and it will start to grow. The medical community and pharmaceutical, they don't want you to do that. Because why would you buy their medicine then if you can grow your own medicine? So they're going to manufacture medicine that's better, faster, stronger, but that doesn't necessarily make sure it's better for you over time. So if I gave you CBD and I gave you Xanax, you might feel relief faster with Xanax, but the effects of the CBD will last longer. and have less side effects negatively in your body because your body's already looking for this. Whereas this is like it's tricking your body. It's kind of like taking melatonin.
So how is it that we don't, like, how is it that that becomes dysfunctional to begin with, that system? How does it start misfiring or something to create, you know what I mean?
And
like how is
question.
it that we need this CBD to balance that if, you know, if it's supposed to be natural and we're supposed to have a balanced system already?
Well, it used to be in our food for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It dates back to biblical times that CBD was used as a form of medicine. It was used for food. It was used to make teas. It was used to make ropes, hemps, paper, all kinds of things. It's only when, I mean, there was actually studies back in, what was it, Eric, the early 1920s, talking about how they were trying to find ways to demonize CBD, and they couldn't demonize the plant. So we've been using it. It's just politically it became legal, and then all of a sudden we start seeing all of these things start to happen in people's lives. We used to eat better too. Our food sources used to have nutrients from the earth. Now we've got to put nutrients into the earth to create things to happen. So I think over time, just environmentally, we've changed what we're consuming, what we're putting in our bodies, what we're absorbing, and that's what the difference is. Because I get asked that question a lot, well, why do I need it now? I've never had it. We used to have it. Human beings used to have cannabinoids in their diet on a regular basis. We took them out for political gain.
Is it just in that one plant historically?
No, cannabinoids can be found in anything leafy green, but they're at a much higher concentration with the hemp plant than any other plant out there.
And that's kind of why we need to quote unquote supplement it now with CBD
Just
products
like
and
you do
stuff
any
like
other
that, right? Because it's been leached out of our diet for decades
so
now,
long.
and now those receptors can't talk to each other without those cannabinoids to help them communicate, right? So that's kind of the big thing that's happened over the last few decades.
And I recently just learned that it's because of the United States it was made illegal in every other country. We forced that because we're like, well, we're not going to do trade with you. And Mexico's like, well, wait a minute. This is our medicine. This has helped hundreds of people. It keeps things away, helps with cancer, helps with all these things. But they needed our resources. So they made it illegal in Mexico so that they can continue trade with us. And that started the whole thing. It just shows you power can go a long way to changing the way we view medicine. So I think it's pretty profound that so many people are coming back into awareness saying, hey, nutrition's important. And this plant helped me. And meditation's important. So like more and more people are speaking up that all of these things that generations before us, Egyptians knew it. All of those things are kind of coming back into play again. And I think that's really, it's interesting to be in this lifetime to watch it come full cycle again. But there's actually a really cool show. I'm not gonna play you guys another one, but it's on Hulu and it's called The Evolution of Cannabis. And it talks about how they found seeds buried with Egyptians and pharaohs and monarchs because they believed they wanted to be buried with the medicine that healed them. And it was really, really profound. And it talks about the entire evolution of how it came to the US, when it became illegal, why it became illegal, and what prompted that. There was actually, if you can go back in time, during, was it Nixon's time frame?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up in a minute here. Where Nixon actually had someone that was looking for chemicals. He was actually part of the alcohol prohibition. He was hired to handle alcohol. Well, when alcohol prohibition was lifted, he needed something to do. And he literally falsified doctors' documents to demonize marijuana. It's really outstanding. And I looked at it, I'm like, this is crazy. When I started going back through history, I found multiple levels of documentation about it. And we always knew politically that had a big role, but now it's starting to come to the forefront that it had a much bigger role than we even knew. So it's really interesting to go down it, but it's called The Evolution of Cannabis on Hulu. Try to watch it, it's really, really good. So does anyone else have anything they'd like to add today or chime in? So one of the things that I learned, and Adrian and I have spoken a lot in the past, is taking a minute to pause. Not everyone's gonna meditate, I know that. Not everyone's gonna try CBD, I know that too. Not everyone is going to take the time to tap, I get that too. I understand all those things, but if you could try to remember when you start feeling anxious, to just pause. Whatever that means to you, maybe that's 1 second, maybe that's 10 seconds. Just remembering the word pause can sometimes be enough to remind you that what you're going through is temporary and you can let that go. You've lived this long through various levels of stress, you're gonna live through that too. And someone said that to me at one of my meetings about mindfulness and anxiety and stress, and it really stunk because most people tell you, you've gotta meditate for 10 minutes, you gotta breathe heavy for 10 breaths, you gotta tap 22 times, they have all of these set things. I'm not saying that. Just remember the word pause, and that's sometimes enough just to get you to be like, maybe I didn't need that. The exhale.
I do this, I just breathe, just stop. Because I get upset when I start getting stressed, and a lot when I travel, I just add a lot of it. And my husband's like, why do you like that? Because I do the shake, and then he says, why? It's like, I don't know why, but I do, it's me, you know? And so I have to try and take those breaths and come back to center. And the CBD helps a lot. As soon as I do a couple drop of hope, within 10 minutes, I stop. My hands are still, and I just have a calmness.
CBD has been helping you with that.
Absolutely.
It helps me sleep. It's obvious I take it. I try not to boast about that because I work here, of course I take it, but yeah, it helps me sleep.
It has helped tremendously. I mean, I didn't want to go on to any medications whatsoever. I've read all the side effects, don't even want to have anything to do with that. Some people need it. I just thought, well, let me try this. And it's really been great.
Life-changing, that's awesome.
And it still comes on. I still get that anxiety, you know, I gotta get to the airport, I gotta plane, you just get that, but it helps stop. Okay, I'm calm now.
And I tell people that, I go, CBD doesn't take the stress away, it just helps you acknowledge it. It helps you own it and say, that person just cut me off, but I don't feel the heat coming up from my neck, and I don't feel my head start to tense. I just kind of acknowledge, like,
just like you said, it just kind of calms the receptors.
Yeah.
Is what it does.
Helps you choose, is it a lion or is it a bush?
I think we need to form an anxiety group, it sounds like.
We are an anxiety group.
Yeah.
We are.
No, I meant like on a regular basis.
Yeah. So here's a profound number. 4 out of every 10 people suffer from anxiety on a daily basis. 1 out of those 4, it's so debilitating that it ruins their life. So 1 out of every 10 people is suffering from anxiety so debilitating that it's literally changing the way that they live their natural lives. I think that awareness and making it okay to talk about it is something we need to bring out there, which is why I like having meetings like this and talks like this, just to let people know, listen, we're every single one in this room, we've all been there, and it's okay. Just remember to pause. Bush or lion? Which is it? For a nice cup of coffee. So if anyone has anything else to add, I'd love to hear from you. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. Our next coffee talk is going to be next month. I don't have a topic for next month. I try to choose a different topic every month. I'm probably going to talk about social issues because around the holidays it raises a lot of stress for people, so we'll probably talk about something related to holiday-related stress or stress from our families or something along those lines. But just a coffee talk with donuts again. And all of our donuts are always sponsored by Your Mom's Donuts, so if you didn't have one, please take one. If you did have one, know that I did not make those. They're amazing, and they're definitely not from my kitchen. So thank you very much for coming. I'm going to go ahead and shut this off, so nobody move. If you don't want to be on the screen, let me shut it off first. And thank you to all of those that watched.